Hi there. Thank you for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Artcast, a show where a couple of visual storytellers get together and take on various topics that tend to bubble up when one embarks on this endeavor of telling stories visually, or communicating visually, I should say. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I'm a cartoonist and a teaching artist, and the other host is...
Hello, I'm Rob Stenzinger. I am a user experience generalist, and I also make video games.
Making the video games and user experience generalist. Mm-hmm. That's a new description.
You got to keep moving, keep shaking. It's user experience as a term, who knows how long that'll last, right? And then designer, yeah, that makes sense. But then designer is often attributed to visual qualities, which makes sense, but it's not. It's a way that that convenience of the well understood symbol you can lose meaning. So it's nice to keep it fresh. Generalist. It's like, well, what's a generalist? It means I do both research and design and facilitation of collaborative sessions. So
there we go.
Broader.
Now the clarification, context. Mm-hmm. So we do this show. Oh wow, Rob! I'm actually picking up my own audio from your headphones. Believe it or not, I don't know why.
I believe it.
That's how intense Rob is. Everybody, he's blasting me in his head. I don't hear it anymore. I don't know what you did, but it fixed it.
I closed my mouth.
So we do this show weekly. We pick a topic almost every week and try to just drill down as far as we can on it in the sense that we do the first half of the show, we think about what does it look like when we're engaging with this particular subject. And then the second half is more about well, how do we think about the subject? And after talking through the first half, how are we thinking about it? Are we thinking about it in any new ways as we engage with it in the future? And for this week, it just so happens, Rob, that I just spent my first couple full weeks in Columbus, Ohio. I'm finally, settling in. My studio is just about set up. A lot of interesting trade-offs with moving from my own house to an apartment for a year. So we're taking a year just to live in an apartment so we can scope out the areas before we decide to buy anything. Apartments have cool aspects to it in the sense that, I don't have to worry about plowing any driveways. They got somebody comes and takes the trash out, There's cool things about it, but then there's also, they don't tend to be as big as a home. So there's all sorts of different pressures and trade-offs that came out of that deal. And so I got to thinking maybe this week we could talk a little bit about studio setups and reorganizing your creative space, just because I found very recently that I had to. But you have been developing your creative space for how long? You've been living in your new place for a couple of years now?
Oh, I think it will be. So it's 3.5 years, I think. So it'll be 4 years this fall.
Holy cow. Man, time flies.
And I'm definitely in a situation, super lucky. I have more space than I've ever had in my entire life. And it's still a puzzle because it's how do I use this space well? And I do keep iterating on it in sort of irregular intervals. And I've been thinking a ton about this as well recently. I think maybe partially triggered by your big move. And I look around, I think, well, am I using this space well? And all these things start coming up. And it's this is a perfect time to explore this topic selfishly. So, this should get us all done.
And now we're in it. Now we're in the topic. The music interlude indicates that we have transitioned over to fully on talking about the topic. Preamble over. Now let's talk about what kinds of spaces do we need. Where do you want to start with this one, Rob?
Well, I think you set up an interesting thing that's a framing of of stages or life context. You've got your desire to pursue some sort of creative hobby or business or both, right? Or maybe multiple, and then you want this, whether for necessity or preference, it's in your home somewhere. And like the kind of home you have and the stage of your life, well, that they have an immense effect, I think.
And the stage of your exploration too, right? Because as I was thinking about like what kind of spaces I've historically needed, it's interesting to. This is the first time as we moved into this place, Ann and I merged her office with my office. So we're merging two people's spaces into a space that's smaller than what either of us had on our own before. And I was very sanguine, or even like, like confident about that scenario, because I think about like, well, I don't need that much space. I've got like my laptop, and I've got a drawing pad or drawing board. I'm set. There's not that much that I need to do, until I realized that like, oh, I do a lot more jobs now than I did when I was first starting out, right? Like, so like when I was first starting out back in the mid 90s, I had a 36 by 48 inch art desk. It's like a drafting table. And then like a box of Bristol board, 11 by 17 Bristol board. And then like I got it right here. Like a cup of pencils, kind of like this.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of us have on our desks. And then my art supplies, my fancy art supplies, which was like, actually back then it was just a whole bunch of Sharpie markers. I kept in a Transformers lunchbox. Like that was my whole rig. That was the whole setup, because I didn't need much more than that, right? Had some rulers that I left on the table. Had the cup of pens that I left on the table and pencils. And then I had the pad of Bristol that I stuck behind the desk when I was done for the day. A desk lamp ready to go. But then as time went on, like the different things that I do in my studio changed. So now we're in like some interesting pressure points. I don't know. Do you want to go where do you want to go with that?
Okay. Okay. So for me, like different life stages and specifics, I think it also ties to the purpose. It's like, what kind of things was I trying to make at this time? So I grew up in a medium-sized family, and at a certain point in like right around my just before middle school, we started getting computers in the house, and all of a sudden there was this desk space. Before that too, it was like in the same space as that we had a couple of art tables, because like for the holidays I'd received as a gift one year a drafting table, then the following year a light table, and that was pretty awesome to have as a kid. And partially this was intertwined, big complex topic, because it was also related to like my first big client was my dad, and I illustrated a book for him. Mm-hmm. And that has a pile of interesting adventures and baggage with it. But it was like, that was very much like this intertwined purpose, because it actually went from like analog production to digital, and didn't, that totally coincided with new tools being in the house, but it was always in this shared space. It's like, I would be on this stuff, my parents would be using it. It's all like this shared space thing. Mm-hmm. And then I'd always have at the same time like a pretty minimal setup, a hodgepodge of an eraser or two, a handful of pencils, whatever would be handy. I would try to have a soft pencil and a hard pencil, and maybe a couple in between. And it was, and then make sure like if I had drawing paper, it was on like some kind of nice like drawing booklet that would have a thick enough backing where I could sort of just sit anywhere and lean back with it on my knees and draw. And that was drawing for fun, and then for that book project.
Right. Yeah. My drafting table, if you want to talk about purpose and function, I mean, it was very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. I got my art drafting table in 9th grade, and at that point I was on the trajectory of like, I'm going to make comics. That's all there is to it. Right. Like so like the purpose of that space was very clear to me. Like, this is the place where I make comics, and I was making comics, all through high school, and then, well beyond that. So it was, and my art desk was never in a shared space. It was always in my bedroom. Like by that time, I had my own bedroom. I grew up in a very big family, six siblings, so like space was at a premium. And when I was really young, I mean, my studio was in a binder because I didn't have any. There was nothing but shared space, right? But
So
then,
did you get your own room because like elder siblings were moving out or something? Or I mean, how did that? How did
yeah,
you score that?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. My older brother moved out, so then it was like, oh, now you get your own space, and so I had, a room with an art desk, and none of my other siblings wanted to be artists, so there was no demand for that space, right? So I just, but it remained fairly mobile, like up until I want to say like until 2001, 2002 when I moved to Phoenix, and then suddenly I got a scanner and I got a desktop computer. Actually, I built my own desktop computer in 2000. Now that I think about it, it was a PC. And I had a graphics tablet. It was like the old IPTEK, AIPTEK, IPTEK digitizer.
Whoa. Interesting. What
Yeah,
made you go with the competitor to Wacom?
the price.
Okay.
I couldn't afford it. I mean, I built my own PC because it was cheaper, and I got my own, or got the IPTEK because it was cheaper, and I could get like a big one. It was like 9x12 or something like that. It was a pretty darn big tablet for the time, and it had like I think you put double A's in the pen. It was gigantic, like Sharpie marker of a pen. But then like suddenly once that happened, it's like now there's like this other big dedicated space. So suddenly I found myself in a studio, like a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my art desk on one side of the room, and now I had this L-shaped glass top desk on the other side of the room for the computer, right? So suddenly now we've got two functions going on. And so the spaces change as a result of that, and suddenly it's a lot less mobile, right? Like, I remember working on some Ninja High School stuff back in 1999. Just before Ann and I moved to Phoenix, we stayed with her parents for a couple weeks, like when we were in between, and I was deadlining, at their house with just like a clipboard. I had like a big old clipboard. I just put my 11x17 sheets on, did all the art on the boards right there, right? But the moment that computer came into the picture, it was a 2001 eMac. You remember eMacs?
I do. Yeah, that's. I remember they were pretty good computer for the price.
For the price they were, yeah. I mean, and we got it through student discount with Ann's school and everything. But so I had an eMac and then that graphics tablet, and suddenly I've got like now there's this space this new space that I have to maintain, right? And I had to start thinking about like what's the footprint of the stuff that we're doing, and this. If I could fast forward just a couple more years, because I think this is actually, I think I'm building a point here, is that suddenly 2004 rolls around, 2005, and Anna and I decide that like we want to start screen printing for our mini comics. We want to make screen printed mini comic covers, so we got the equipment for that. Now we're in a 2-bedroom apartment in Ann Arbor, and there wasn't a space in that apartment to do the messy work of screen printing. I don't know if you've ever done like liquid emulsion screen printing, Rob.
Yeah, actually, I don't know. I think both Kate, my wife, and I get excited and, I don't know, impressionable, easily convinced into adopting and trying new creative outlets. And even if it's in a form where it's like neither of us have tried this at all, or maybe we did in high school, and then we're like, I don't know, this sounds fun. Let's somehow squeeze this into, and then let's actually make a real thing we need. Like for instance, making tote bags for a family reunion. Did we need it? No, but it was this gesture gift thing, and we're like,
That's
oh, that's
neat.
the catalyst. That's it. We're going to learn screen printing, where yeah, getting an emulsion on a screen and then exposing it to the exposing a design that's on that's been taped to it with ultraviolet light and all that stuff. Or yeah. Anyway, so we've got this crammed away somewhere. It's sort of
It's a mildly toxic affair, right?
oh my
Like
gosh, and the lighting is a huge logistical thing. What light? What room do you have that for sure has no possible light that you also don't need to use for showering, right?
So for those who've never done this before, what it does is you have like this literally this piece of silk, this like fine woven silk that's like attached to a frame, and then you take this U-shaped scoop coater thing, you fill it with this green sludge that you're not supposed to let light touch, like so you have to have a red light on, like a photography studio, and then you like tilt the screen at an angle and you very lightly drag the emulsion over top of the screen so you get this thin coating on either side, or both sides rather. Let it dry, and then you have to place it approximately 12 to 18 inches from this like enormously high wattage bulb for 22 minutes or something like that. Or no, 8 minutes for exposure. And then you have on the screen a negative image of the art that you want to print. And then once the 8 minutes is passed, then you have to take it with like a garden hose or something and spray out whatever emulsion was exposed to the light will harden. Anything that was hidden by your design will remain porous, and you can spray it out with a water gun. So this can get very, very messy. And I did screen printing in high school, like in like the Voc Ed department, and like they had like this giant room with like a car wash sprayer to like clean off your screens, right? And it was like in this giant floor to ceiling sink. We're in this 2-bedroom apartment. It's not meant for this kind of activity there. So like we were burning screens in the bathroom, and like pushing towels underneath the door to like keep the light out, and like spraying things out in the tub with like just like we got like a hose attachment from like the grocery store or the department store. You could hook onto the shower so you could spray, and it was very messy, and it was not ideal to be doing that kind of work there. So then we move into this house, and now we've got a basement. And I was like, oh, we can do messy work down here. There's a utility sink. And so we set up these, workbenches, and suddenly I've got a drying rack, which you can actually see right here. This is the drying rack that we got for that studio. So when we're printing things in screen printing, we can, place them all face up in these different drawers. So, you can print 60 or 70 things at a go, let them dry, and then pull them out and do another batch of 60 or 70. Hard to do that when you have an apartment, right? So you do it less than, like when I was living in the house with the basement, I did a lot more screen printing because I had easy access to it all the time. And then a few years later, as you can see right over my shoulder, if you're watching the video, we decided, let's get into letterpress printing too, which presents a whole nother thing. So like each of these new jobs that we're creating is also creating an issue of storage. So now I have to store screens for the silk screening, drying rack. I need to make space for that now. Paper materials to print on, inks. We had a whole cabinet of screen printing ink, which is now underneath our guest bathroom sink because I don't have the cabinet anymore. And then there's this device, this letterpress, which is like all cast iron metal. The thing weighs like, as much as like, 2 small children. And then we have to have a special table to put it on where we have drawers to keep other inks and letterpress plates. And, we have 10 drawers of type down underneath. I don't even know, you can't see this buried right now, but underneath this table here is like 10 drawers of lead type for setting up the letterpress. So suddenly you've got this whole issue of how do I organize this stuff so I have access to it, but I can still move about and do the work that I need to do on a daily basis, which I think we'll talk more about in the second half of the show when we start thinking about like how we navigate these decisions. But just a big one for me as I thought about this subject again is just that beware of when you embark on the endeavor, you can start out by needing very little space, but you can quickly find yourself needing a lot of space, even if you don't take on extra endeavors like these, like when I point to the letterpress and the screen printing, because another thing that happened a few years into my working in comics is suddenly I started amassing work. I have these pages of art that I've made over the years. Where am I going to put all this art? So like in the 90s when I was first starting out, I just had like a plastic flat, not like a hanging file plastic bin. You can maybe put like a 500 sheets of paper on the thing. I didn't need much more than that because I didn't have 500 sheets of comics art done yet. But suddenly, 10 years in, you've got a lot of artwork they have to put someplace. So now you got a storage issue as well.
Yeah, it's and it compounds. I mean, so then the storage for what kind of media? Also, storage for potentially work in progress when you have physical projects that you want to be organized with and whatnot. There's a lot to this. I don't know what tensions necessarily drive it, because my physical space limitations don't necessarily stop me from falling in love with a new way to make things. And so then I just end up finding a way to roll with it, depending on the stage of whatever stage I've been at, as far as having more space or less space. And that's, over the course of my adult life, that has both expanded and contracted. Where once I started like that, my first like big serious project, it was starting that game development company in the early mid '90s with some friends. I kind of lucked out because I needed collaborative space, also in my own creative space, and my creative space happened to be the corner of a kitchen. So I had the kitchen table. That was pretty handy for meetings and stuff. And then, but I kind of lucked out there. It didn't stop me from, let's see, having a guitar amp, guitar effects, and a MIDI keyboard, which was on a plank of wood on top of a sturdy cage for the doggo I had at the time. And then right next to that was sort of this built-in sort of desk that I imagine one uses for paying bills or something. And I'm like, well, this is where my computer goes. And and then stuff surrounding it too, right? So I had like boxes for software and floppy disks and quick 20 backup tapes. You ever used the quick 20 format? QIC dash.
Yes, yes. They were like little-ish tapes, weren't they? They were like really
sort
thick.
Of like a DAT tape.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Old Media Podcast.
Actually, I was using that at a job I worked. One of my last day jobs I worked at back in 2002. Like they were still using that backup system, and they had recently migrated from SideQuest drives to that.
Yeah, that's funny. That's SideQuest drive is a little spendy. I didn't splurge on that kind of thing. But it was a pretty good setup, and corner of a kitchen and whatnot. But I was creating music, physical and digital art, and doing a little bit of coding as well too. So I actually posted a picture on Instagram of that little setup. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Instagram.com/Rob Stenzinger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But so like that was, you have those interests, but then once I have space, all of a sudden, I mean, it's nice to fill that space differently. It's aesthetically interesting to have the good fortune of having more space, because then you don't have to have everything crammed on top of everything. And it can also affect, like, depending if you're recording live audio in a room, it's going to affect your acoustics and stuff like that too. So, a lot of side effects.
That's another thing that I'm reminded of is like the introduction of doing all this podcasting stuff changed the amount of stuff that I have in my space with regard to now I have this camera that I'm looking into right now. I have this microphone, a mixer over there at my last place at my house. In the studio, I had like an entire rack that was sitting next to you saw it, Rob. It was right next to my computer desk, where it had like a compressor limiter, a preamp, and my scanner on it, and it had my microphone and camera and recording equipment on it. So suddenly you have these demands for all these extra spaces, which they cause some logistical puzzling, right? Because with recording equipment comes a whole bunch of wires. Right, so suddenly I have all these XLR cables going all over the place, right? And then, if now I have like a computer, an external monitor, and a compressor limiter, and a preamp, and a mixer, and a microphone, and so now it's like a matter of binding all this stuff up into these giant wads of cable and trying to be careful about that, so that's not I'm not creating trip hazards in the studio as well, right? And like mobility becomes like a big deal, like the moment you start, working with any kind of space limitations, right? Like how are you going to get around all this stuff? Like I'm running into a real issue right now where the corner of my desk here, like there's not much space between this and then my flat file, which is right there. So it's like there's this weird little L shape that I have to like navigate around in order to get over to my flat file where I have, some different supplies that I might need. So where do you put what, I think, is largely informed by some of that too, which we can talk about a little bit more detail later, I think. Are there any other things that your studio has now that's informed by lessons you learned in the past about working with limited spaces, working kitchen?
Okay. I think ergonomics. I knew that I eventually wanted to have like a standing sitting desk. And then I also wanted to, and then after having a standing desk for a while, which I did, I received as a gift a little while after we moved into the house, this house, there was, I started to realize, wow, my legs and knees are getting tired because I stand almost all the time. And so then just recently, the last 6 months or so, got it. I now have one of those mats that you see often at places where someone works at a cash register or whatever, what have you, because, and it's fantastic. So I learned like ergonomic adjustments are a big deal. Having like pads, wrist rests and stuff, that has been a game changer. Where I even have ones that I will try to carry with me as well. If they're a little smaller and thinner and whatnot, because I notice the position of my wrist, whatever. So yeah, ergonomic things are big, as far as learning from not having that in the past. That drives adjustments. I do. I mean, it's super. I try to learn some things, and I do like failed experiments as well. Like my office chair is like somewhere in some other room, and it gets reused for other purposes because it's I don't know what it is, but if you ever use a chair, do you have big feelings about your chairs? Sometimes, am I weird this way? I get big feelings about my chairs.
Big feelings how?
I like hate.
Oh,
Hate's a big one, like where I'm like, this chair is not nice, and then eventually that goes from, it escalates over time, and I've never had a chair that survived for even like 18 months.
Wow.
Where I'm like, nope, now you're on the list. You're another chair on the hit list. You gotta. Anyway, sometimes they get repurposed, sometimes they get sold, or whatever. But anyway,
can I ask like what
splurgy on a chair really? So.
I wonder if that's part of it. I wonder if you need to get like a Herman Miller Aeron or something like that.
I worked at a startup once that had those. It was nice. I don't know, but I don't know how.
I hear good things.
Is it that nice? I mean, it's like $800 some bucks now. Nice. I'm not sure. But, but maybe they kind of semi live up to the hype. I'm in a permanent state of disbelief when I sit in one of those chairs, so it's hard to get good data. So,
it's like you can't help but think that you're sitting in an $800 chair, like when you're reading
$800 right now, and I'm like,
right. Like when you read Moby Dick, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm reading Moby Dick. You can't even enjoy it because you're just thinking that you're reading great literature, right?
Right. One other thing, as far as lessons in some, like the failed tangent of chairs. The one thing I thought that was interesting that is the accommodating your creative life partner kind of thing, and then like that there's always how do you navigate that, like so one thing I thought was pretty fun is, and it was pretty useful for a while, so when Kate and I lived in an apartment earlier on, before our first house and now this house, we it was a puzzle as far as, well, what do we do as far as her pottery hobby that she had at the time, pretty serious side pursuit that she had for years, and that that was paused for now once we had kids. If I know people can do it, but the logistics to have that much space to make a safe environment with kids and pottery and
was she firing things in a kiln too?
Yeah, well, in our first house, She had a kiln, and
Wow. That's no joke. That's something that's like not great to have kids around unless
no.
there's a lot of space. Yeah.
Well, there's the kiln itself, and then also the glazes, right? So she also
Oh, that's
studied
right. Yeah.
making glazes and all the chemistry
Oh,
for
wow.
that. It was neat to just as an observer. That's something that I'd played with, like throwing pottery now and then, but like yeah, she was super into it. But we made the space in our apartment because we had kind of like that the the closet right by the door of the apartment. It wasn't that big of an apartment, but it had a big coat closet, and it was like I don't know, at some point we realized that we just pop these shelves out of here and boom, you can at least throw pottery. And it worked. Anyway,
That's awesome.
so you can find little nooks and crannies here and there
So
in the spaces.
similarly to what you were talking about there, at my first apartment in Phoenix, Ann and I actually we were really trying to be. We went there without having any jobs or anything. We were just like going out in a wing and a prayer kind of thing, and so we were very conservative in the apartment that we got. We got like a 1-bedroom apartment. We were like.
Oh yeah.
We were fiancés, right? Like we were getting married in like 6 months. So like there was still like it was not a problem to share such a small space, except for like, well, where are we going to put our creative stuff, right? And so it just turned out that in the bedroom, there's this weird nook in the wall where like it served no function. It served absolutely no function, but it just perfectly fit my art desk in there. Like you just slide it in and boom, now I'm like just sitting in this little nook that I'm surrounded by like just this weird little outcropping in this bedroom. And I was even able to put some shelves above it so I could put some of my art supplies up there. But I quickly discovered like the trade-off became that what is it? Like I said, 48 by 36 inches, something like that. If I had too much stuff on the table, like my pens and my rulers and everything, suddenly when I'm working with 11 by 17 Bristol, it became a real pain in the tuchus to turn that page around and flip it the way I like to when I'm doing all the big lines on there. So it meant that I had to start keeping a cleaner desk. I had to keep more of my stuff up on those shelves above, right? So like, yeah, you can work with all sorts of little tiny spaces, but there's all sorts of trade-offs that happen, and we can talk more about those trade-offs maybe in the second half of the show. Is there anything else that we should put here before we take our break and start talking about like the thinking that we do when we're setting up our new spaces?
No, I think we're pretty good. This was
Okay.
this first part, it's kind of like there's a story of your life situation and incorporating your creative space in your workspace, and I think we naturally hit on some trade-offs there, but like it's you can think about like how do you design it independent of other constraints and just think sort of what if and but that's a fun exercise. It's fun to fantasize about not having limitations, but like it always comes back to you've got all this stuff and only some limitations of where you're going to put it, how are you going to use it, and all that. And I can't really separate that from the history of like different stages of my adult life. So
Yeah, same here.
I'm glad we did that in the beginning, but I wouldn't be surprised if we end up digging back into it here and there.
Oh yeah. That's just setting up. Yes, we set up the historical aspect. Now let's talk about like the philosophical aspect, tying back to the historical aspect. So in about a minute. Oh, there's some comments in the chat that I want to grab from some experiences that other leaners had too. We'll end on that before we go to the second half. Troy Shadowing Tronics is in the chat and says. I had an old school desk my parents found somewhere and a small table with a bookshelf to put my drawing supplies and paper. The desk was the kind with a wire shelf under the seat. Got too big for it. Now I use an old computer desk and that same small table plus various drawer boxes for supplies. I was lucky I didn't start with Bristol until after I moved to the computer desk, so I don't have this problem with the school desk. I might have to get a larger artboard so I could use larger paper. Yeah, see, so like that... Another thing that I ran into in 2007 is I switched from 11 by 17 to like 9 by 14. It's like legal size paper, which was just small enough that like now I could keep kind of a more cluttery desk, but I could still have room to turn my paper around. And then I even, with a graphic novel I worked on with Sarah Turner back in 2005 and 6 called The Replacements, I was penciling 8.5 by 11. I like went all the way down to like that size, which was an interesting experiment to try as well. But yeah, like that's another limitation and another trade-off is like, how big of a thing do you need to work on the thing that you're working on? So, for instance, if anybody follows Krishna Sadasavam on Instagram, that man has a lot of monitors, right? He uses a lot of monitors in his work.
He's a man of many monitors.
He is a man of many monitors, and I feel like that's the digital version of working at 11:17, right? Like he's working on the big boards.
Yeah.
And Carrie is in here, Mushin Girl, saying, I'm feeling the space pinch right now. I moved from a lot of space in the basement to a leftover space in my bedroom, and I have some non-traditional use of shelves, but I get by. And like another part of this is that like the limitations that you were talking about earlier, Rob, is like half of the stuff in this room was stuff that we got by accident, right? Like this drying rack was a friend of mine would like donated it to us. It was like, hey, I got this drying rack. Do you guys want it? And I'm like, yeah. So like it just fell into our lap. The desk I'm sitting at right now was donated to us by an elderly couple who were downsizing. And they're like, yeah, we're not using this anymore. Do you want it? I've got some, let's see if I can see them. Oh, it's kind of hard to see. But these little file cabinets, these itty bitty file cabinets that we
cool.
keep. Mini cabinets. Again, donated to us, right? So like a lot of the stuff is found. Some of it's bought, like that's just like an IKEA table underneath the letterpress there. Mm-hmm. And there's some other like IKEA shelving. There's like a tool chest in our closet that we use to keep some art supplies in. Some of this stuff is bought, but like there's also the fun, and I do think it's fun, of working with what you got. And so like when it came to time to set up this studio here in Columbus, we had 3 art tables, right? We had the one I got in 9th grade. Anne had one in her office. Then we had this great big giant one that I'm sitting at now that was sitting in our letterpress area in our basement studio. And we realized we can't fit all 3 desks in this place. So we put 2 of them away, and then we just brought the big one and we're just sharing it, right? So like which means I have to start thinking about like how I leave my stuff. I can't just like leave a big mess in here now, because now it's like, somebody else is using the space too.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of one of the like a modern office situation too. Is that you can have a lot of day jobs where you hotel, right? That's what they'll call it. Is you don't have a permanent desks, in some places. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that, or similar. Maybe
actually, when
severe, but still,
Yeah, my newspaper job, it was just rows and rows of computers, and you just like your station was wherever you sat down that day, right? So like you didn't have like you didn't have flair or any kind of like desk accessories of any kind. It was very industrial. Yeah, and Carrie also adds, flat storage is my biggest challenge right now. Yeah, we'll talk about storage too in a minute, because like the storage became a big issue when I moved here, and how I thought about what gets stored and what doesn't, and how things get stored. That was something that Ann and I did some serious crunching on, like because we just couldn't have as easy access to everything as we once did. So what do you do about that? So there's our tease for talking about in the next section. So in a minute and 30 seconds, we're going to talk about the thinking that we do behind the decision making in planning out our creative spaces and working with limitations. But before we do that, we have to thank some people who make this show possible. And those people are the folks who support us on Patreon. Yes, patreon.com/leanintoart is the website. What is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote. If you enjoy this show, if you believe in us and you believe in the work that we do, you can say so by supporting us and making the show sustainable with a monthly pledge of as little as $1 a month. You can cancel anytime too. You can just like show up, do one pledge, and then bail out after that and just say like, there's my donation this time. That's what I can afford. We want to thank 5 people who have been supporting us in that way. First up, India Swift. Thank you, India. You can find India on Twitter at @OldSwifty. And thank you to Kelly Ishikawa for believing in us and what we do. You can find Kelly on Twitter at Kelly of Ishikawa. Thank you also to Nate Marcel, who you can find on Twitter at Great Sea Monster. And then thank you to Alexander Steenhorst. Alexander, I couldn't find your Twitter handle, so if you want to update your Patreon profile with that, I will give it a shout out next time we mention you on the show. And finally, Catherine Sugru, who you can find on Twitter at Cat with a K, SOOGROO. And you can join them at patreon.com/leanintoart, where you'll find all the shows we make as well as the extra leans, the shows we record only for people who support us on Patreon. And those posts are just me and Rob riffing on an idea and finding a topic, and then that post becomes an open mic post where you can take the conversation wherever you want in a safe place where fellow leaners hang out. And we want to thank everybody who has been supporting us there at patreon.com/leanintoart. It means a lot to us.
It really does. Thank you so much.
All right. Second music time. What am I going to use for the music time? What is this? Oh, those are the music tracks I used with Zach. I don't want to trot those out again. So let's grab a nice short, heavy one. So in the second half of the show, we talk about the thinking that we do, things we consider when reorganizing our space. So you mentioned earlier, Rob, that purpose, what are you going to be doing in that space, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that breaks down to, what the project and then the activities, what kind of, and then sequence activities, stages of work and whatnot. Are you working individually? Are you working collaboratively? And it can really, it can be a lot. If you're working on essentially, designing and defining something, and you probably need somewhere for folks to get together and sit. And then how are you collectively capturing ideas or whatnot? You can work on a flat surface, a table, whatever. You don't have to have a whiteboard. I've been in either situation where I used to have a pretty big whiteboard.
Oh, Rob, do you remember that big whiteboard in my green room, in my computer room?
Yeah.
I had to get rid of it when I moved. That hurt so bad. It was this gigantic. It was what? It was about 7 feet wide by maybe about 5 feet tall. It was a mammoth whiteboard, and I loved it so much. I loved how that house, we had it optimized where there were so many surfaces to capture ideas. Our dining room had chalkboards all over it, and then there was a whiteboard on the wall next to my analog drawing desk. Right, it's just so many spaces to grab ideas. But you're right, you can also use a notepad.
And yeah, so individually there's ways to switch it up and get more flexible in the format and how you can arrange things. But then, but right, the purpose ends up informing it, right? So a lot of times for me, the purpose has been well, what's my main project, or what are my main projects? And then what's my role, and what am I trying to do to contribute to those projects? And then all of a sudden I need sort of workspaces for actions and tasks to get the outcomes I need, right? Where, places the sketch is not that demanding. It's pretty easy. It's really nice to have an art desk, right? There's the ergonomic benefit of not working at an angle as far as how you're tilting your head and whatnot, because repetitive stress is a big deal, and
it's real.
Yeah.
You were talking about chairs earlier. Actually, another thing I had to get rid of in the move, partially because it just wore out, was for the last 18 years I had, we called it my Lisa Simpson chair because it was the chair that she had in her bedroom. It's one of those ones where it's a seat with no back, and then there's a knee pad. There's a place to put both of your knees, so you're resting on your knees as well as your bottom. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's
called the back chair or the ergonomic chair or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's what it was called, ergonomic chair. Yeah. And it had wheels on it, and in that basement floor, it was a concrete painted basement floor. I loved that chair. I adored that chair. I didn't have any back problems when I was working with it. I could, get up and, stretch out like this really easily without bumping into the back of a chair. And it was easy to move around on because I had 4 wheels on it, so I could scoot around to different parts of the studio really easily. Right now, I'm just using an old wooden kitchen chair, which is, it's okay, but it's not as good as that ergonomic chair. And I might, when we get our new place and I actually have a proper studio again, I might go ahead and get a new one of those. But yes, your comfort. And if you're going to spend a lot of time in this place, so this leads me to something else, is how much time are you going to spend there, and how much moving around do you need to do, right? Is everything within arm's reach, or is it put in uncomfortable places where you have to get up or get down or get out of your chair, get up and like move across the room to get the other stuff that you need to do the work that you're doing. And that determines what gets placed where for me. So for instance, screen printing stuff is in our guest bathroom under the sink because it's a choice I made is for this year living in this apartment. I'm probably not going to do as much screen printing as I normally do. I'm probably only going to do it once. Therefore, I want to leave it a place where I can get it, but I'm not. It doesn't need to be in this room. It doesn't need to be within arm's reach, right? The screens are also tucked away in a closet, right? So I put a bunch of things in the closet in this studio where I made the decision of like, am I going to get to this thing? Am I going to need to touch this more than once this year, right? More than once, maybe out of the closet. If I'm going to only touch it once this year, it's staying in the closet for now, right? And then it turned into, am I going to touch this more than once a month, right? And then like it gets a little bit closer because now I'm going to touch it at least once a month, but maybe not more than that. But now it doesn't need to be in this cone. It doesn't need to be in this space that much, right? So now what's in this cone? What's in like immediate arm's reach? Well, things that I'm using on a regular basis.
What about okay? So frequency of use.
Frequency of use.
Okay.
That's a big factor, and that is going to change the layout of the studio as the year goes by. Because let's say that later on this year, come September, I might do another batch of printing of some mini comics with the letterpress behind me. Well, then that means that for at least a couple weeks, that thing is going to be in high use. Therefore, other stuff that may be directly in front of me in the drawing space might get moved to make room for the letterpress space, right? So trying to build some kind of sense of modularity to the room as best we can. So like that cart is on wheels, so we can like wheel it into different areas. Not everything can be though, because like lead type weighs a ton. So we're not moving that. Those 10 drawers of type are staying right where they are.
That's your piano, basically.
Yeah, it really is. Thank God it comes in 10 parts. I couldn't lift it all at once.
Okay.
Good.
So let's see. So yeah, modularity and whatnot. This is the stage where I'm trying to get to. Where I'm at right now is I live in a space where I don't have anything in long-term storage. I'm not renting a long-term storage unit right now. And then I have it stored so I know where all my stuff is, and it's stored thematically enough where I like the same stuff is roughly with the same stuff for the most part. There's a couple of things because we have enough space where there's a little bit of duplication, right? So I have an office and Kate has an office. There's a little bit of puzzling as far as, well, some office supplies, it's ambiguous as far as which storage spot are they, right? It's not the worst thing, but it's something that I think I'm like, nah, I want us to clarify that. Where do we put these common tools and things? But it's still something that I think what you have as far as the frequency of use is really that's a good point. I have a need that I would like to incorporate, but I just don't know how to totally solve it yet because I don't really have quite the furniture for it. And I just sort of make do with whatever table or desk is available. There's I started to get more into electronics and physical prototyping, building and playing with electronics. Like Kate and I recently podcasted about on the Art and Science Punks show. We talked about cool kits, right? One of these kits is the Adafruit Adabox subscription. And there's electronics there. They're pretty approachable. They don't ever, that I've encountered, require soldering, but I'm set up to solder and stuff. But it's all kind of squirreled away. It'd be neat to have us have a almost like a physical workbench where so much of my adult life, it's all been visual art, physical media, but not too demanding. It's not like I'm doing acrylic painting or oil painting, right? That's space demanding, and that's super awesome on its own complex world. I've had the simpler physical media needs plus digital for a long time, and then a sprinkling of music, right? And but now there's this other thing, and so that's this tension of I think I can solve it with the space I have, but I haven't quite figured out how I want to do that yet. So it's an active thing. I'm puzzling out.
Yeah, because that is, like you said, like a workbench is a very specific kind of surface to work on. And I'm thinking about the room you're in right now, which I've been in, and you have like a table off to your right that we can't see on camera. But as I think about
Well,
the table,
that
that's
got reused. So it's
oh,
now
did it?
that's so we have a make space. So this is so that when I podcasted, when I first moved into this house, my camera faced that angle, right? And now it faces this angle. So I have kind of an L-shaped room.
Yeah.
And then the table I have to my side that's now this was Kate's kitchen table when we first started dating, and she lived in a tiny apartment. And but it's such a useful height of a table. I can't get rid of it. And but right now I just sort of use it kind of sort of like that. Like I use that table where it's like, all right, I'm going to build some Legos. All right, I'm going to put together mini comics. All right, whatever. And it's just sort of that space. Yeah, so I'm puzzling that out too. I miss having an actual big enough table to work at, but
yeah. Having an actual workbench table like I had in my basement studio
you
was
totally had a workbench.
I totally did, yeah, and it had like
Yeah.
the pegboard behind it that we could hang tools on and everything. It was great. It was really lovely. I already miss it.
Yeah.
But
What drove
so
that physical workbench need?
oh, well, it was the screen printing. I wanted to be able to screen print multiple times a year, right? And the goal originally was I wanted to do it a lot more. I wanted to do more experiments. I wanted to practice more things with it, and it's just like finding the time was difficult. Now the limitation is more specifically that it's going to cost me twice as much time to do it because I don't have the space to do it. So now I'm like, I know that there's going to be a time. I looked at, what are we doing all year? So like, I guess this is another thing. Part of the space layout is determined by Ann and me sitting down and talking to each other about like, what are our goals this year? What things are we doing this year? What events are we going to? And one of the events that I hope to attend this September is the Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. So it's like, I've never been to this show before as a tabling guest. If I get in, I'm going to want to like restock all of my mini comics because this is all new for this audience, right? Which means that I'm going to have to screen print a bunch of covers. So that means it's all going to happen at one time rather than, this weekend I'm going to do like a batch of Boulder and Fleet covers. Next weekend I'll do a batch of Pickles and Taft covers, right? You see what I mean? Like I don't have the freedom that I once did to just set up the stuff whenever I need to, because I literally used to have an entire room dedicated to nothing but just that equipment.
You're reminding
So when
me
you
of the just a side note where Kate and I deal with this when we make candles every year. And candle making in our old house took over our main level for the most part. But now we have this little dining room thing, and then that's for the most part it just takes that over, and it's not that big of an effect for us now in this house. But yeah, there's a thing where it's all of a sudden there's this temporary big change where you're somehow working around it, right? This big project's dominating other projects. Those other projects, like all the projects, have to keep moving forward. Which could include eating, or other work.
And because now that I'm dealing with less space, when screen printing or letterpressing takes over more space, I'll have to make sure that those happen at a time where the creative output that happens at my art desk is less brittle, right? Like the scheduling is more flexible and robust than say where I am right now, where it's like I really have to be like, driving forward and performing on my comics art right now. I have to really get this project done. So there ain't no time for this area to get disrupted by anything. So yeah, a big informer of how I set up my space is like, what is the purpose and what is the frequency? How frequently am I going to be doing that? What specifically am I going to be doing there? And then how much moving around do I need to do for that? So for instance, when I'm drawing comics at this desk, I don't have to move around a whole lot. So if like stuff gets like piled up around me, It ain't a big deal. But when it comes to letterpressing or screen printing, that is an activity that requires a lot of movement. I'm printing here and I'm placing the prints over here for them to dry, and I need to have airflow for like the fan to blow on the printed things so that they actually dry. With the letterpress, right? Like there's like, it's a big physical machine that I'm pulling a big lever on, right? Big stacks of paper around me, and then ink around me and things like that. So, and then the stuff to clean that letterpress is incredibly toxic, and I have to open up all the windows because I don't want to be in an enclosed space while you're playing with Gamasol. So like suddenly, movement becomes a big issue. And so things that, like when I was talking earlier about like, oh, I don't need it within arm's reach. Well, you need to have a lot more things in arm's reach when you're doing certain kinds of activities. So the room will have to be redone or moved around a little bit when I start switching to using letterpress again. So, which means that I'm not going to use the letterpress as much this year as I did last year.
It's really intriguing, this idea of, I don't know if I could pull it off, but like having a modularity that is organized enough where it's like, well, maybe there's a workbench that can slide behind this other thing because I need this, different kinds of space, right? So what if I could slide and move where some things were sort of put away when they don't need to be active, but then there's kind of like the other active thing. So like, what if I had, I don't know how that would work. Is it almost like a table that's like a Murphy bed, but then that'd be in the way, and I could put that away when I needed to work bench.
So you'd have the SDF-1 of studios.
Yes. Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, I could actually, I could set up a little, Raspberry Pi that'd play audio whenever I push a button, and then like, play the
Opio Minucci music plays. Yes.
Yeah. And then like I'm sure I couldn't make it all robots that make it happen. I could just, during that be experiencing the joy of transforming my office.
Troy throws in the chat, it's like set design. You have to be able to readjust for the next scene or project. That is a great way of thinking about it. Yeah, like if you ever watched like a play put on, like all the pieces that move back and forth and in tandem. Here's a simple way to think about it. Like this blue cart right here that's next to my desk, that's something Ann set up, and it's on wheels, and it's got like, here's all her painting supplies, and it could be wheeled around different parts of the studio as she needs it, right? That's a way to think about it. But then, yes, if you could, like the tables that we used in the classrooms when I taught at the Art Center were all on casters with locks, right? And then they also folded up. So the table could like collapse, and then you could push it against a wall. But then, boom, suddenly we could set up the room in a variety of ways, where we could set up classroom style with 2 rows of 6 tables, or put all the tables together in one big giant table. Whoa. Rob, you still there?
Oh, good. And maybe we didn't fully lose connection.
Okay. I'm still here.
Good.
Are you still there, Rob? Okay. So Carrie's saying the camera changes are not showing. So Carrie, what if I click on Rob? Is Rob showing? Okay, now it is. So we ran into a bandwidth issue there for a second.
Oh, okay. So the camera changes are not showing. Okay, fair enough. Hopefully, I think you probably got to look around here. I don't know how much cable I got, but like looking around my office again is like there's it's L shape. There's closets along this wall. I've got some built-in bookcase things, a ledge which I cram full of books. Another ledge where I cram full of DVD media, which I puzzle and debate both sides all the time, and then these recent ads, these storage racks, which again, this is the angle that when I first moved to this house, that I would record the podcast because my desk was on this wall. So I'm kind of, let's see, this wall. What's the camera? I'm not being a great handheld camera person right now. So, and then I actually have. I don't know if you can see that video game little setup behind me.
Oh.
Yeah. So, in media, whatever. It's like in one of my it's like a leftover super old TV, and why not put it to use? But yeah, it's enough space to really do a lot with, and I could do way better, and I would like to figure that out.
I like the idea of pursuing more modularity, right? And I mean,
I got
which
excited
is
when you described those tables at the art center. That's interesting.
I mean, I'm sure they weren't cheap. So that's like, there's the trade-off, right? Is like a lot of my equipment is all, like I was pointing out, gifted to me and Ann. We were very fortunate with a lot of the stuff that we got. But if we had more space and if we had more budget, yes, I would certainly look into doing something like that, because that would be really cool to be able to like change the space all around. But when you're working with a small space, what do you do? Well, one of the answers we came up with, and I'll use my camera over here now, try to show this again, is looking for little pieces of furniture like this. I think this is just like an IKEA thing. It's like three little bins that are just on wheels, so that you can have all of our painting equipment in one space, right? This tool chest that we put a whole bunch of art supplies in is on wheels, so we can move it to a variety of locations, right? Yes, so that's like, it's meant to have like a whole bunch of power tools and wrenches in it, and instead we put a whole bunch of printing paper and pens in it.
It's a handy form factor. Those tool chests. And
yeah. And part of the reason we got it is that the top set of drawers actually comes right off. It's just sitting on there. It's not attached. So we could, it's extra modular in that, like, we could have them in two separate parts of the room.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, modularity, interesting puzzle. I mean, have you ever looked at like IKEA hacks and think,
no.
Oh, it's interesting. I don't have one in mind, but yeah, like Kate and I were thinking of transforming our make space table, or actually recovering that to, where I would get that table back in my office, and you know what I mean, but where we get a different IKEA tables and then add plywood to it and add casters and turned it into a more flexible, different kind of table with storage built under it and all that stuff. But like that term IKEA hacks, is that an official IKEA hack blog or whatever?
Well, I'm looking. It's called IKEAhackers.net.
Like if you search Pinterest, you'll find lots of a variety of folks who are talking about essentially hacking IKEA furniture into different uses.
Okay, so instead of like actually pulling up a website, people just do a search for that. Yeah, me too. Because also there might be some ideas to use something that you already have that you're thinking of getting rid of, and so right. No, that's great.
Yeah, interesting puzzle though. That's so what are you thinking as far as this in this section, like the things we consider when reorganizing? I mean,
so something you added to the notes.
Yeah.
We did, and something I want to hit on, I think, as final thought, and it's something you added to the notes. I think is like something I completely overlooked, and I'm grateful to you for bringing this to the notes. Is energizing your media and space, right? Like, how do we think about it? Is I am one of those people who is immensely tempted and intrigued by the idea of optimizing and in making everything more efficient, but there's also an element of making it a pleasant place to be.
Which I'm pretty sure you excel at.
Why do you say that?
Oh my gosh, I was in your old house, and it was a stunning, amazing, delightful, immersive, joyful, and the joy per square inch on display in that place, off the charts. Just stunning. And I feel like anytime I would come home after a trip out to one of the events in Ann Arbor, I would literally, I look around at my house, any house I've been in since I've known you, and I'm just like, ooh, wow, this is empty. and like not fun like it could be, So like you did great with lots of fun displays, themed displays.
Yeah, I had a shelf in my. There's a shelf in my studio that was my Rodimus shelf, and because I really dearly love Rodimus Prime as a character, and so I have like a lot of different kinds of Rodimus Prime merchandise that I put on display, right? Just to say like, let's just celebrate this dude that I think is really cool. But then also, yes, our upstairs. It's funny you should say that, Rob, because like I get like one of two reactions when people visit me and Ann. One is they'll react like you, like there's so much like celebration and thoughtful celebration placed all over the walls of this place. It's almost like an old salon art show where everything's all smushed together, right? Then you have people come over like, whoa, you guys, like this is not an Apple store. There aren't elegant lines and all this like nice clear open space for me to like be alone with my thoughts, you know. So yes, we would have like lots and lots of stuff on the walls, and then even on the stuff on the walls, there's more stuff on that stuff. So like we'll have a framed picture, and then it'll be adorned at the top with a bunch of Anne's tiny meat collection, because she collects dollhouse meats, you know. Weird stuff like that, and all sorts of like this place we're in now. I didn't realize how big our old place was by comparison to where we are now, because we can't put up like about half of the art that we had on the walls in our old place, right? And I can show you right now, like I've got some art up on the wall on my side of the studio, right? There's my Transformers the movie poster, the drawing of Bumblebee that Ann did in 6th grade, you know, my Battle Cat cell from Masters of the Universe, my signed Optimus Prime trading card, but like that's it. And that's pretty barren compared to what I used to have, right? And like same with the action figure setup, right? It's just like, there we go. That's all we got room for now. Everything else is in storage.
Yeah, I mean it is quite different, but you are starting. You do have it in your space, and I mean, yeah. This I barely. I'd have not much. I mean, I have some random things, and I'm starting to practice it. But
okay.
Let's see. I didn't see this camera. Wow, this is funny. This is funny, like shaky hand cam episode, special episode of the Lean Into Our podcast. Got a little painting right here of a demon and some pictures from different important events in my life, and also this is let's see. This is the photo of Kate being not eaten by a shark, but my youngest thinks that's what it is. It's just a big fake fish at a gas station, and then over on these shelves. Let's see. I'm slightly pointing in the right direction. So over on these shelves, I mean some souvenirs and stuff or whatever, but like lots of crammed with books, and then way up there's some video game like boxes and paraphernalia and stuff. But like it's not as I guess over here then I've got the wow, I don't know how to point in a way that. So how am I pointing? Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm like stunned at how bad of a camera person I am. So there's a poster that I designed, the book cover for Zombies at the Gates and Other Tales, and then Dragon Ball Z,
and then Goku.
Yep, and stuff. But like, gosh, is it rough work in progress? It is not refined and themed, and like I want to have it live up to. Well, yet it doesn't have to be, because it still is good energy. Yes.
Well, let's talk more detail about that right. After one more break, and then we'll do final thought talking about making the place like a welcoming place for you, and talk a little bit about like what I like to call totemic magic, right? I use that term figuratively. I mean it figuratively. I don't actually believe that there are magic spells imbued in all of my things, but I believe in the psychological power of totemic magic, right? So before we do that, we got to thank some more people who make this show possible. And those people happen to be us. We make the show possible because we make the show. And the show is informed by the things that we make when we're not making the show. And the thing that I make that I hope you will check out today is called Science Comics Rockets, Defying Gravity. It is a comics documentary about the history and science of rockets. So you'll learn how rockets work. You'll learn a little bit about physics, but you'll also learn some interesting facts about space history. And it's told by the animals who participated in space history. So you'll get to learn all sorts of cool stories about how animals were involved with helping us learn how to move celestial bodies around, like how the International Space Station is up there because of things that we learned from animals a long time ago. It's published by First Second Books. If you haven't purchased it already, it's meant for kids, but I would maintain that it would be an interesting read for adults because not many of us, unless we go into a career where physics is largely used, not many of us think about physics all that often in our daily lives. So it'll be a great sort of eye opener for you. If you're the kind of person who actually like enjoys documentaries and PBS, I think you'll enjoy this. It's also, I think it's the funniest thing with my name on it. So if you haven't checked it out yet, ScienceComicsRockets.com is the website. It also has where upcoming appearances are in the sidebar because we're doing more rocket stops this year. We're going to be doing Free Comic Book Day in Columbus. So,
that's a cool
Rob,
term. Rocket stops.
rocket stops.
Oh, good branding. And I just wanted to add my voice. It's a wonderful book. It's super fun and funny and educational. And I think like ideas in physics, you totally end up needing to explore this. And this is a great approachable way to do it when you start programming video games. You want to, make a character jump, or you're building something that has a rocket powered something, right? This is perfect. Or thinking of any kind of missiles, right? So
it'll help you kick butt at Kerbal Space Program.
yeah, it's awesome. Talking animals, talking about physics.
So, Rob, what do you want to mention that you make?
Oh, let's do Guitar Fretter.
Okay. Let me go
right,
to
so-
guitarfretter.com.
Guitar
There
Fretter
it
is
is.
like my first commercial video game that I made, and I've updated it like 5-6 times, added tons of features to it, but it's been around a while. You probably have heard it mentioned like the entire history of this podcast, but it's not like it's sat on the shelf and hasn't been touched, and it's not like it won't be updated again. What is it? It's about making it fun and like an arcade game to learn the note positions on a guitar's fretboard. And not just like a six string guitar. You could do 6-7 string guitar, or even 4 or 5, and you can custom tune. So like with the custom tune, and like you could pick custom tune plus 4 string, and yeah, it's a bass in the game, but like all of a sudden, like you could be learning the notes on an ukulele, right? And whether it's a baritone or a soprano doesn't matter. It's 4 strings. So yeah, any kind of fretted instrument, you got a lot of wiggle room and flexibility to set yourself up and then play, because these little demons come down the screen. They've got notes, and then how you dispatch them so they don't take away your health is you just hit a note that matches it on the guitar fretboard in any of its positions. As you do the matches, the notes get covered up, and all of a sudden now you're getting pushed to memorize it. But you're also getting like more health. You're getting bonuses for how many matches you do in a row. You get bonuses when you complete a whole string or a whole fret, and it's just rewarding you for like, yeah, come on, memorize this thing. You can do it. So there you go. It's on lots of platforms. You can play it on iOS or Android phones and tablets. It works on desktops as well. If you go to guitarfretter.com, and you'll be able to find the links to all those stores.
Awesome. And if you have purchased the game, a great thing you could do is give it a review wherever you purchased it. Same thing for Science Comics Rockets. If you want to give it a review on Goodreads, that would be pretty neat. But if you don't necessarily care that much about the stuff that we make, you like the way we think about stuff, fair enough. This is a thing that we make, this show, and there's more things like it at leanintoart.com/workshops, self-contained videos that you can download at a price of your choosing. And if you're watching the video on YouTube, giving it a thumbs up right now helps more people find the show. YouTube's a pretty important search engine. And if you're listening to it in a podcatcher like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, giving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to us helps more people find the show as well. It means a lot to us when you do that. So thank you if you have done that. It means a lot.
Mm-hmm. Very awesome. Thanks.
Okay.
Well, final thought.
Totemic magic. Yeah. So I want to be upfront and acknowledge that this is my disposition and this is my outlook. Friends of mine have, I think, correctly observed that I am very susceptible to the heroic journey type of story about a person undergoing great hardship and amassing friendships and coming out the other side better, changed, stronger, and then bringing something back to the world to make it a better place, right? Like that type of story resonates with me, and so I tend to use metaphors that coincide with it a lot in my life. So like totemic magic is like well, in the Lord of the Rings, Galadriel gives Frodo and Sam this little glass vial, right? Do you remember this?
Yep. The light,
Like the little light.
something.
Yeah, the light of Galadriel, I think. It's been a while since I read it. I don't remember, but yes, they use it to like ward off evil, right? And like I think about like little things like that, like things that represent ideas that give me strength in dark moments, right? I'm feeling very vulnerable as I talk about this because I know that this is going to come off as very silly to some people, but it's something that I use to get myself by.
It's okay to feel silly. It's you're not alone. I'm getting amped up to jump into how you're not alone on this, but I'll cool my jets.
So just like things like Rodimus shelf, like Troy Shadowing said in the chat, he's got a Bumblebee shelf for the same reason. Yes, Bumblebee, hands down, top 3 Transformers in my opinion. I love Bumblebee a lot, and I know I've talked about this before. Like when I was in 5th grade, I daydreamed almost every day. Like my dad actually had a yellow VW Beetle, and I would just go sit in it, and I would think like, oh, if only you were really Bumblebee, so I could just talk to you about my day, right? Like I didn't want to go fight bad guys. I just wanted to hang out with Bumblebee, right? But
I didn't know your dad actually had a Beetle.
Yeah, he did. It was a yellow VW Beetle. And
wow.
Yeah, and like I would just sit in it. Like it would just be sitting there in the driveway, and I would just go sit in it and just daydream about like, oh, if only this was really my friend. I want to be Chip Chase. But like, so Rodimus. Like, why did I have a Rodimus shelf? Well, because like I love that he was the leader in training who had to follow in the footsteps of this iconic hero. Like, you're the president after Abraham Lincoln. Uh-oh. What are you going to do about that, chum? How are you going to live up to that, right? And like that's a lot what his character was about, was like him like wrestling with that, and yet he always kind of came out better at the end of all of those episodes that were about his character. He even goes to like a midlife crisis in one episode where like in The Bird and Hardest to Bear, like he actually like gives up the Matrix and goes back to being Hot Rod and starts acting like a younger man kind of thing. But so like he represents this idea of like we're not done, we're not finished. Like a lot of heroes in children's fiction like show up as fully formed and already made. He-Man shows up, he's already made. He's fully formed. Rodimus wasn't done yet, and so like I liked having this collection of different iterations of that figure to serve as a physical reminder that you're not done. So I think about that with all the stuff that we put up. Like Ann and I both think really hard about this stuff when we're putting our stuff up in our studios and our creative spaces. Like, what do these things mean to us? Like sometimes it's just like I just like it. That's all, But there's other times where I think about like the ideas that it represents and how I'm like keeping that present in my space.
I couldn't agree more. I think we pick things and that we surround things that we care about, whether it's we have room and the ability to add lots of stuff surrounding us. But if we're even the things that we wear and our clothing and how we even like key stories that we carry with us, right? That's I think it's part of just how we experience the world. We have a narrative, and then I think some of us get excited about reinforcing that narrative in some ways, where it could be just symbols of our different beliefs that we carry on us. It could be the for me, my yearly goal planning, I typically make oh gosh, now I'm forgetting what it's called. It's not a MacGuffin. It's not a totem, but that word is now stuck in my head, and it's the talisman. There we go. That's like one of the outcomes of our goal planning process in the last few years, is that Kate and I will sort of use gosh, what do they call that kind of jewelry where so we have some it's metal stamping, I guess. So there's like a tiny little anvil you put on a pad on a table, and then have a little hammer, and then you have a letter, a lot like your letters from, but these aren't made of lead because they would just splat. And then you put it on top of the softer metal, and you sort of whack a letter imprint on it. Then later you color it in with a Sharpie and then rub the excess off, and all of a sudden you've got this little thing with whatever you want to say on it. And that's meant to just reinforce of the just what do I believe in right now about my in particular my mission this year, and what am I celebrating? What's giving me energy and excitement, where if I'm just reminded of this, I get to get in touch with those feelings. And so surrounding yourself with other symbols about stories and characters and themes that resonate with you, I think is very similar. And I don't have anything to add to that necessarily, other than like I do it too. And some days I'm literally getting dressed thinking of like, yep, it's going to be, I say talisman head to toe, as many as I can get, and I'll try to keep it thematic. Like I'm going Pikachu today or whatever, right? Without actually dressing up as Pikachu. And then, because I'm whatever, I don't want to cause that much trouble in the office. So, and I think about it, and I feel great doing that. It's almost like joy armor. And there's other thing though too. It's like I have this now in my current setup where I have enough space to be surrounded by parts of me, or emblems or symbols, photos, sometimes artwork, and sometimes something I made or a friend made or what have you, or gifts. And then it's telling almost like not someone else's story. It's telling my story. Like I'm living inside of my story, and I'm accepting these things and these ups and downs and challenges and whatever. I have different stages of my life. And that's a thing that I want to be accepting of and nourished by when I'm in my sanctuary, my space.
I think that's great, and I think a great visual representation of what we're both talking about is if you ever watch any videos or films about Charles and Ray Eames's studio. This goes back to like now we can talk about Herman Miller chairs, right? And like the irony of the Charles and Ray Eames designing all this furniture that was supposed to be like really comfortable and very cheap to get, and now it's like exceedingly expensive furniture. But if you ever saw what their studio looked like, their workspaces, and it was like covered floor to ceiling with all of these artifacts of things that they joyfully interacted with. And I feel like when I look at pictures of their studio, I feel like that's the platonic ideal of creative workspace for me personally, right? And I'm so excited about looking for a new house to be like my forever house, and like let this place accrue like barnacles, all of these little artifacts of things that Ann and I have creatively and joyfully interacted with.
That's it. You've given barnacles a pleasantness I didn't expect.
Yeah, like stuff that just like grows in the side of the boat as you go on your journey, right? So it's like all these little tiny pieces. I daydream about like whoever the poor unfortunate soul who is the executor of our estate. It's like, oh man, I gotta go through all this stuff. Just burn it.
I doubt that'll be a deal. It'll be a pretty awesome museum, I'd imagine.
Well, I won't see, but somebody will see.
We're all on that path, but like it's the that's another aspect. Hadn't dug into that. Maybe that's another episode topic.
Well, yes,
in the future.
Yes, yeah.
What kind of museum are we trying to leave behind?
Well, I feel like that's a Jenny Rob interview episode too, because she did that talk at A2CAF last year about like your legacy, right? Your digital and your physical legacy.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, her and her team are dealing with that problem all the time. To essentially, how do you categorize and make useful insight from like a hodgepodge of things artists have kept
Yeah.
or inconsistently kept and whatever, both physically and digitally. Yeah. That's she's certainly, her talk was great, and that'd be fantastic.
Okay, I think we did a podcast. So if I could close with one request to the leaners, we have a contact link on on leanitoart.com. I would like to do another Q&A episode soon. I think we did the last one at episode 250. It'd be fun to do another one. And so if folks want to email us at leanitoart@gmail.com or use the contact link on leanitoart.com to let us know what you are wondering about, what kind of topics you'd like us to take on next, that would be really... I would get a lot of pleasure out of engaging with that, and I know Rob would too.
Definitely.
So, okay. Well, thank you for this discussion, Rob. And we record the show every... You're welcome, Rob. We record this show every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, and we stream it live on YouTube and then collect it as a podcast at leanitoart.com and patreon.com/leanitoart. And we'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanitoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanitoart.com. And I'm also on Instagram. Same name.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.